Hi all, you Math 1C people. I'm Mr. Bruns, and thanks for stopping by. I'm going to give you a quick little refresher of all the ways that we can prove triangles are congruent. If you were in my class, you might remember that we put a whole bunch of these things together on the list. And there were certain ways that we could prove triangles were congruent, but only if they made it onto the list, and we will eventually start talking about things that made it onto not the list. One of the first ones we came across was side, side, side. Remember, our whole goal was to prove two triangles are congruent, and really to do that, we needed 6 things. We needed to show that all 3 pairs of corresponding sides were congruent, and all 3 pairs of corresponding angles were congruent. However, we came up with this list of shortcuts that would work for us, and the shortcuts cut our work in half. So now we only need 3 things instead of 6 things. And so one way to do that is if you had a couple triangles where you could see this triangle and that triangle, and if we could show that there's 1 pair of congruent sides, and there's another pair of congruent sides, and here's a 3rd pair of congruent sides. Look at that. You've got 3 pairs of sides that are congruent. There's side, side, side. Okay. Another one that we found that we were able to put on the list is angle, angle, side. So if you could find 2 pairs of angles and 1 pair of sides that were congruent, that was enough to prove those triangles are congruent. But we also had angle, side, angle that also worked. And so there's a big difference between those 2 things, the angle, angle, side, and the angle, side, angle, and the order in which those letters are showing up, where that S is compared to the 2 A's. For angle, angle, side, this S is not in between the 2 A's, and for this one, angle, side, angle, the S is in between the 2 A's. And so in this case, I would have maybe 2 pairs of angles. This angle is congruent to that one, and this angle is congruent to that one right there. And so the side would have to be in between those 2 angles. So there's an angle, side, angle situation. Over here, if I had, there's a pair of angles, there's another pair of angles, but we need a side that is not between the 2 angles. So for example, maybe that side's congruent to that one. That would be an angle, angle, side relationship. Okay. We also had a side, angle, side that made it onto the list. For side, angle, side, we have 2 side lengths, and then an angle. Again, the order, the way that this is written, that angle is in between the 2 sides. So maybe I know that this side and that side are congruent, and I know that this side and that side are congruent. That means this angle is in between those 2 side lengths. There's a side, angle, side. And we had a 5th one. We had one last thing that showed up on the list. Sometimes it's just referred to as HL, or you might have some teachers who like to refer to it as RHL. The R in there is just to remind yourself that even though HL only has 2 letters, there's actually 3 pieces of information you need in there. The H stood for hypotenuse, and the L stood for leg. And the only time we were ever allowed to have a hypotenuse, or we could talk about a hypotenuse, is in the context of a right triangle. So there's this understanding that one piece of information in there is that one of these angles is a right angle. We have a right triangle. So that's kind of what the R in RHL stands for. Okay. Then it's saying that the hypotenuses are congruent. So here's a hypotenuse and there's a hypotenuse that is congruent. And then the L stands for a leg of the triangle. And so maybe this leg is congruent to that leg. So this is 2 pairs of sides and 1 pair of congruent angles. But notice the angle is not in between the 2 sides. So this is a side, side angle, not side, angle, side, but this is a side, side angle. That normally does not work. In fact, that's going to show up on not the list in just a second here. But because that angle is a right angle, we can use this HL or RHL. So here we go. Here is not the list. And we found some things that made it onto not the list. Here it is. What we just described, side, side angle, is on the not the list. We also found that angle, angle, just having angle or maybe even angle, 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 did not work. That is on not the list as well. And really, I think that's going to pretty much cover all of our options. We did talk, I think, in class about what if I just had 2 side lengths? Is that enough? Or what if I just had 2 angles? Is that enough to prove some triangles are congruent? And it's just not. You know, for angle, if I have this triangle here and this triangle here, they might all have the correct corresponding angles, but those 2 triangles are not going to be congruent. So we can find some counterexamples for all of that. So here's our list. These are our options, and sometimes it just doesn't work out and you have some things that are on not the list. But we'll go over some more examples in the next video here, okay?